1968 continued the decade's trend of upheaval in Hollywood. The removal of the moralistic production code for the new MPAA rating system allowed new Hollywood directors like Bob Rafelson and Peter Bogdanovich to make transgressive debuts. Escapism ruled at the cinema with sci-fi films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and musicals like Funny Girl dominating the box office.
I have a feeling that it's never going to rain on your parade.
Wait.
And Hollywood's classic movie genres were reinvented with fresh takes from foreign directors like Roger Vadim and Sergio Leone.
A lot of the new cinema of 1968 was influenced by Europe. Europeans really saw these changes in Hollywood, this openness to new kinds of film, and many were flocking there. And you saw some of the biggest names in Europe making an English language or American film.
Barbarella was a great way to kind of smuggle European sensibilities into the Hollywood system. It was an adaptation of a European comic book that was as weird as could be, and you also have Roger Vadim finally making kind of like a big budget picture.
Barbarella is a problematic fave for me as a Jane Fonda fan. She was obviously with Roger Vadim at the time. Their relationship was sort of souring at that point, and he really wasn't taking the best care of her on set. That said, the movie is just a ball of fun. It's silly, it's crazy, it's sexy, so sexy.
It's funny in a way that I don't know that they intended it to be, but it's actually really interesting to watch Jane Fonda, who, as we know, is a powerhouse performer, just switch off and let herself glide above this movie.
I think of the scene with these tiny automaton doll robots that have metal teeth that are sort of slowly advancing on Jane Fonda. It's bizarre, it's over the top, and it's quite funny in a strange way.
It's very much aligned to the comic book, but it's also incredibly progressive and ahead of its time in terms of its themes of female sexuality, enjoying sex. It's campy, it's tongue-in-cheek, but it's also deeply political.
The pacing of Barbarella feels like you're turning the pages of a comic book. Nothing really matches up, it doesn't really make sense, but you kind of don't care because I think it's so overly visual and so overly stylized, and Jane Fonda is so beautiful in this film that it's just kind of like eating a sickly, sugary candy.
It's a movie that people keep threatening to remake, and I don't see what the point would be. You could find an equivalent to Jane Fonda, you could put her in retro costumes, you could have the same sort of postmodern approach, but it wouldn't be that same cocktail of the moment.
Sergio Leone was already incredibly famous when he came to direct Once Upon a Time in the West, and this is his first Hollywood picture. He assumed the red carpet would be rolled out for him and he could choose any project he wanted, but he couldn't. Hollywood wanted him to stick with what he was known for, and that was making a spaghetti western.
Once Upon a Time in the West opens with that long scene at the train station where it's just those three gunmen, and it goes on and on and on, and if it were up to me, it would last 3 times as long. I just love being in that space.
The sound design is telling you the story of time passing while you wait. And suddenly, what appears is a man, badass Charles Bronson. And then, bam, 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 the movie really begins.
I feel like Charles Bronson is just as cool and calm as a cucumber in this film. He's got this amazing face, this amazing swagger, this sly grin. Every time he shows up in a scene, you hear this harmonica playing that's just and it's so eerie. Everyone in the room is just like, what is this? His face tells so much, but you don't know the ultimate secret that he's carrying that kind of makes him so powerful.
Now, Henry Fonda, of course, at this point, was known for being the, ultimate good guy. You're looking at him as the voice of reason in 12 Angry Men. He is the everyman. He is Tom Hanks before Tom Hanks. So for him to show up and murder an entire family, including children, and it's just those blue eyes, that steely gaze, these blue eyes that had entranced America for so long, murdering a child, and you know you're seeing a completely different film.
Sergio Leone made this film with two other movie brats, namely Dario Argento and Bernardo Bertolucci, and they came up with this idea. It's a real love letter from Italian cinema fans to the Western.
Leone had said with this film that he was more interested in the rituals that precede violence than the violence itself. And so Once Upon a Time in the West is all about build-up.
The raw story that's there is probably 50 pages long, and he just stretches it out with stylistic excess that is so sublime and so satisfying to watch. It's a Western that feels like you're at the opera. It's like the most operatic the Western genre has ever gotten.
Almost despite himself, Polanski has made a near-perfect film in Rosemary's Baby. The horror in Rosemary's Baby is feminist horror. It is a disturbing film about a cult, about Satanism, about your home turning against you. But truly the horror in this is how women can be controlled by a society that doesn't listen to them.
The shining light of Rosemary's Baby is the performance by Mia Farrow. She is just spectacular as Rosemary, as this woman that is slowly unraveling a secret about a secret society that lives in her building and has taken advantage of her body and soul. And I love the scene where Rosemary comes back and she's got a short haircut. And of course her husband doesn't like that she's cut her hair.
You look great. It's that haircut that looks awful. If you want the truth, honey, that's the worst mistake you ever made.
He's upset that she's realized, oh, I can take control of myself. I can be in control in a situation. And he knows that she is actually not a delicate flower that can just be taken advantage of.
When I think about Rosemary's Baby, the thing I think about most is John Cassavetes. He is my favorite part of this movie. And I think it's because he kind of tapped into something about Roman Polanski that maybe we know now. And he's playing a person that is so seemingly sensitive and just so charming and lovable, and then he's just seedy and creepy underneath.
The ending of Rosemary's Baby is very powerful to me. It's this idea that she knows she has given birth to an abomination, but she's still its mother, and that the ultimate trap is this maternity. She can't leave, she can't kill this thing, she has to stay and raise it. And that's what the Satanists know, and that's what Rosemary knows inside. It's not just societal forces, there's something within you that means you must raise this thing no matter what.
The film that captures the transgressive spirit of 1968 the most has to be Head. Director Bob Rafelson was an aspiring filmmaker when he first conceived the TV version of The Monkees. The series was a runaway hit and ran for 2 years, and the band took on a life of its own. Then along came Head to destroy that life.
Obviously, you don't have Head without A Hard Day's Night. Hard Day's Night is the definitive rockumentary, and the Beatles are, yes, infinitely greater musical band than the Monkees. But the Monkees have also been, tarnished by history for too long as if they're some kind of Beatles ripoff. They were a very smart, very subversive, sort of talented group of guys. They're existing in a moment not just to Americanize the Beatles or rip them off, but sort of take that sort of pop idolatry and then push it in more obviously political directions.
I definitely think that Head is a lot more openly anti-authority and anti-Vietnam than a lot of movies you see in 1968. Everyone else was kind of hiding it, but the Monkees were the perfect cover for this kind of thinking. They are literally showing images of devastation in Vietnam. It's a quite jarring movie, and I think that nowadays, that seems so progressive, but the joke of the Monkees just kind of disconnected any potential audience for that content.
I think a lot about some of the crazier moments in this film. A kind of Wild West shootout that ends with them crashing through the backdrop and into the sound studio. It's really fourth wall breaking as a film.
Good hit? All right, that should be it. Okay. Yeah. I think we're on the other side.
Hey, Bob, that's not right, man.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
you know, about hitting a girl.
Over
Hey,
there.
is that all right, man?
It failed at the time, partly because
Shocking.
Partly because of what it is, but also partly because Monkees fever had crested by the time it came out, which is a shame because they called it Head. The reason they called it Head was so that if they made a sequel, they'd be able to say, from the producers who gave you Head.
The thing with films when they are so ahead of their time is, of course, they bomb. It's because there hasn't been any time to really breathe or to really understand what was happening in culture. Head is so fantastic in 1968 because it's very of the moment. It's very raw. It's distilling this counterculture as it's happening, and audiences were just not ready for that. Targets is an instance of new Hollywood before it was really a term, working with old Hollywood. It's the transition point or the waypoint between two very different ways of filmmaking.
Peter Bogdanovich had not made a film yet. This would be his first film. He wanted to make a film. He had been working with Roger Corman, and Corman decided to give him an opportunity, but there were a lot of catches. Most importantly, he had to use Boris Karloff, which Corman had contracted for 2 days of extra work after finishing another movie with Karloff, and he had to use footage from Karloff's film, The Terror. So he had to use another movie and this actor and then somehow tell an original story.
It's loosely based on the shooting in University of Texas by Charles Whitman. And it's not the first American shooting, but it's the first mass media covered shooting. In the movie, it's really kind of trying to unpack the feeling of what does it mean when somebody kills people for no reason? It's not something that America had really grappled with before. And in a directorial debut to try and answer the question of what is going wrong in America and what is going wrong with youth and what is horror is so much to deal with.
What's really interesting about Targets is he takes a very B-movie approach and applies it to a searing character study that is really speaking volumes about celebrity and about aging out. What happens when the biggest movie star in the world gets too old to perform. It ends up being a character study, a kind of exploitation movie about a killer on the loose, and also a redemption film.
Bogdanovich gives Karloff the room to find gravitas and a tenderness that he was never allowed in his own work.
And I saw that it was death that had jostled me. And she looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Oh, master, please lend me your horse that I may ride away from this city and escape my fate. I will ride to Samara, and death will not find me there.
This movie gives Karloff the chance to be the hero he never got to be in the other films, and it just took 35 years to get there. And there's something really lovely about that.
There was one movie in 1968 that really didn't find its audience, but as time has passed and people look back on the 60s, they've found The Swimmer to be just such a great comment on the closing decade and the various changes that were about to happen to the prior generation and what would happen going forward.
It takes a lot of gumption for a star like Burt Lancaster to kind of subvert his star status with a role like The Swimmer. He was incredibly handsome, still very fit in his mid-50s. He was a huge star, and here he's playing this very sad and depressing and toxic character.
I won't let you ever get scared or hurt.
Mr. Merrill.
If there's anything you want, anything at all, come to me. I'll be your guardian angel.
Mr. Merrill.
Julie. Julie!
I think part of the film is actually to show how fit Burt Lancaster is at this age in his career. He's just wonderful looking, and he's still imposing and has this physical presence and this very athletic presence. And this man is kind of going through all the swimming pools in his neighborhood. He's figured out they form this network. He can just swim back home.
You watch it and you sort of innately now understand in a new way all these kind of structures and attitudes that make systemic inequality happen.
The best scene of his power slipping is the Janice Rule scene when he goes and visits her in her pool. The "you loved it" moment.
All your stories about your old deals and your old girls and your golf scores and your bloody war and your bloody duty to your wife and kids. You bored me to tears. I was playing a scene with you.
You loved it.
You met your match in me, you suburban stud. I was acting.
Now it's very commonplace for, toxic masculinity to kind of be its own genre, but at the time it was kind of a fresh idea, and this kind of delusion of someone who believes that everybody is in love with him and that he is the greatest person in the world, and then having to learn the hard way that, oh, that's not actually how people are looking at you.
By the time our protagonist arrives to the community pool, we have these commoners bring up the fact that he has all these bad debts all over town, that his precious daughters have been in trouble with the law. They're not hiding anything from him, whereas previous to this, all the rich upper-class people know this and are just letting him kind of pretend that they don't.
It's very bleak, ultimately, but it completely matches up with many films of the late 60s where kind of these upper-class, well-to-do, successful white men are looking back at their lives with a little bit of disappointment and emptiness.
When you're talking 1968, that era of film, I don't think there is anybody cooler than Steve McQueen. He is the guy's guy. He is the ultimate lover. He is just the one that I think we all want to hang out with, pretty much.
By 1968, Steve McQueen was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but he'd also developed quite a reputation for being tough on film sets and hard to handle. He really reached the next level in '68 because it was the first time he had projects as a producer that he had developed from the beginning that were to his vision.
He's not a typical alpha male. He's not a sort of method actor kind of introvert. He's not funny. But there are some people who just understood how to hold the camera. Some of it is a matter of physical beauty and attractiveness, which he had, and sort of an instinct for how to make small things register on screen.
So to you, it was a job, no more. Were it more? And you the dedication I was led to believe?
You believe what you want. You work your side of the street, and I'll work mine.
Bullitt, as a character, is just this remarkable, self-absorbed, swaggering jerk who, he's the hero because he looks like Steve McQueen. But the movie is sort of setting up what's coming in Dirty Harry, the idea of a cop who'll stop at nothing and do anything, but actually isn't a good person. He's righteous, but he's not going about this in the best way. And I really do think you don't get Harry Callahan and even Popeye Doyle in The French Connection without Frank Bullitt.
Bullitt has arguably one of the most iconic car chase sequences you will see in any movie ever made, not just in 1968. This really set the standard for car chase sequences. You've got tons of tough guy cars in this film, Ford Mustangs, Dodge Chargers, just wreaking havoc on the streets of San Francisco. These cars are flying through the air, landing, bouncing, screeching around corners, and just causing tons of dollars of damage that the city's gonna have to pay for. It's crazy.
Director Peter Yates was a British filmmaker, and something he brought from Britain was location shooting. He was very used to not filming in studios, not faking sets. So filming throughout San Francisco is something that he loved and he really pushed for.
Even the Library of Congress has deemed this movie culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And since 2007, it is now preserved for all time. So And when aliens come and visit us in the future, they will see Bullitt and be like, damn, this car chase scene slaps.
Steve McQueen epitomizes cool in the Thomas Crown Affair in a way that you don't really see anymore, in a way that I don't even know if it would be possible anymore to do. Our hero is an Ocean's 11 George Clooney-esque mastermind, but he's not doing it like George Clooney did in Ocean's 11 because he's fresh out of jail, needs money. He's just a very deeply bored, rich man who is apathetic and a genius.
It feels like such a hinge time, the Thomas Crown Affair. I mean, Norman Jewison was just coming off In the Heat of the Night. Faye Dunaway had done Bonnie and Clyde, but it hadn't come out yet, so Jewison actually had to go and watch rushes to see if he wanted to cast her. You just sort of feel like when you watch this film that you're watching an era turn.
With the Thomas Crown Affair, Norman Jewison had also become obsessed with this multi-screen technique. He'd seen it at Expo 67 with the kind of classic Ontario promotional film, A Place to Stand. And he worked with Pablo Ferro to create these sequences where the scene splits up and you're seeing multiple perspectives. It's something that a lot of people were excited about at the time. There's a few films like that, but this is really the one that people tend to point to as the height of the trend.
The focus of the tension in this movie is between two people working the capitalist system differently. Faye Dunaway and Steve McQueen have such a natural candor and charisma with each other on film. You really believe every moment of when they're playing with each other, teasing each other, and breaking each other down.
Let's play something else.
The director, Norman Jewison, said he wanted the longest kiss in screen history, so he actually got his director of photography, Haskell Wexler, on a skateboard, and they went around and around and around the couple and sped up to create that kind of swoony effect.
We just want to be like this guy who has everything and still is just deeply, deeply uncaring about all of this mountains of wealth and accomplishments that he has. He knows something that we don't know, and we want to know what that thing is.
I think the Academy Awards celebrating the films of 1968 are often thought of as a bit of an embarrassment, partially because they were swept by the fairly old-fashioned musical Oliver, but there are touches here and there of these new exciting movies coming through, and I think you especially see that in the unprecedented Best Actress tie between Katharine Hepburn and Barbra Streisand.
If you like reality TV, if you like backstabbing and cutting one-liners, you will love The Lion in Winter. Every actor in The Lion in Winter is so good at handling this dialogue, but it's Katharine Hepburn and Peter O'Toole who elevate bitching to an art form.
The script in this is incredible. It is some of the meanest, smartest dialogue you will ever hear. It builds to this scene where they're in the boudoir of Eleanor of Aquitaine, played by Katharine Hepburn, and they all have knives. And she screams, "Of course we all have knives. It's 1183.
And what if John died?
No, wasn't there! Why wasn't there? A knife! He's got a knife!
Of course he has a knife. He always has a knife. We all have knives. It's 1183 and we're barbarians. How clear we make it.
The Lion in Winter is kind of a 12th century succession. It's a film about three very stupid sons trying to succeed from their father and sort of eking out an existence where all they do is compete with each other.
I want you to succeed me, Richard. Alice and the crown, I give you both.
I've no sense of humor. If I did, I'd laugh.
You have a young Anthony Hopkins, who you could just tell is virile and hungry to take over as a leading thespian. But he's just a supporting character for now because this is Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn's show.
She had to define herself as this is who Katharine Hepburn is, and this role is so good. It is so perfect for what we would come to know her as. Somebody who is cynical, somebody who is funny. She's somebody that comes from the early styles of acting, and here she is just as exciting and modern as a young ingenue in Barbra Streisand. So you're seeing somebody really pushed into something new and just taking it on perfectly.
Looking at Barbra Streisand in Funny Girl, it's such an incredible debut, and we're introduced to her from the back. We only see her turned around in this glorious leopard print coat. It's really kind of taking its time. You get a sense in a build-up that this is a huge, huge star in the making.
William Wyler, who at that point is an Oscar-winning Hollywood old hand, you can be very confident with his, name on your movie. And even though Funny Girl is very lavishly produced, and some people think it's a little bit too long and all the money is on the screen, as a director, he kind of stays out of the way. Like, you'd barely know the movie was directed because all he really seems to do is just, point to Barbra Streisand.
It's everything you could want in a film, and it is anchored by the most perfect and pure performance by Barbra Streisand. You see her in scenes with dozens of extras, and she still stands out. She is the one that you're looking at. My favorite scene of Funny Girl is probably the Most Beautiful Bride scene, where Fanny takes control of her narrative and says, I'm not beautiful enough to be the most beautiful bride, so I'm gonna twist this in a way that makes it work for me in my comedy.
You really watch this movie and you think, was there ever a better conjunction of role and star? Everything that they say throughout the film about Fanny Brice, they also say about Barbra Streisand. She's talented, but is she pretty enough? She has a lot of personality. Maybe it's too much personality. Oh, she's a perfectionist. Maybe she's too much of a perfectionist. It's just one of those moments where you literally can't imagine anybody else in that role, and you just thank whatever movie gods aligned so that this person and this role came together at the same time.
Growing up as a teenager, seeing that film and just knowing that you can look different and still be considered beautiful, and you can be talented, and you can have this personality and still succeed wonderfully, really gave me something to hold on to. And I followed her career after that.
1968 managed to have two gigantic science fiction films at the box office. I think partially thanks to the fact that Planet of the Apes came out before 2001: A Space Odyssey. It wasn't really a competition. There was room for both of them.
On the surface, Planet of the Apes is a science fiction action film, but deep down, it's really getting to that which terrified Americans. It's about nuclear war, it's about environmental destruction, it's about civil rights. It's a lot when you think about it and you actually dissect everything that it's doing in this guise of a blockbuster popcorn action movie.
One of the most interesting things about this film for me is Rod Serling's involvement in the screenplay. Rod Serling famously was the creator and the writer for most of the Twilight Zones, and because of his particular concerns with race and the Cold War, he added that extra bit to the screenplay that really made the film, I think, resonate even to this day.
The performances in this are amazing, especially when you consider that they're acting through those huge ape appliances. The film actually won an honorary Academy Award for the makeup in this, which is incredible.
Objection! Sustained!
Sustain all objections, but face the truth.
Yes. Behold this marvel, this living paradox, this missing link in an evolutionary chain. Silence her! The movie is just an exercise in sadomasochistic humiliation for Charlton Heston. He is stripped naked, his voice gets taken away, they keep threatening to cut his balls off, he's chased, he's blasted with water, they lead him around on a leash. Kim Hunter says that he's ugly. Like, if you're into that, it's quite a kinky movie in that sense. But it's watching this symbol of Hollywood stardom be debased that's so thrilling.
Right at the beginning of Planet of the Apes, one of the characters says, it's not about where we are, it's about when we are. And it's obviously a foreshadowing for the rest of the film, but I think it's said so casually that people don't notice it. And so you still get the big surprise at the end.
Well, I remember when my dad first showed me Planet of the Apes when I was a child. He said, oh, this has an incredible twist ending. Wait till you see it. And I said, it's that it's Earth all along, right? Because I'd seen the Simpsons episode.
Yeah.
And he said, not necessarily.
One part of Planet of the Apes' reputation that I think really got lost is it's an incredibly haunting and harrowing movie. Charlton Heston, as much as he's kind of the bold adventurer, his whole crew dies, and in slow, horrible ways. And I also think that people have this conception of the ending that is a lot sillier than it is, because the ending actually just has no music. It is only him screaming. You just hear the lapping of the waves. It's an incredibly unsettling ending.
So when Stanley Kubrick makes Dr. Strangelove in 1964, he stands alone as the hippest filmmaker in America. He's the only one with the guts to make fun of, mutually assured destruction and nuclear proliferation. And the question sort of becomes, well, where does he go from there?
One of the most amazing things about 2001: A Space Odyssey is that it is probably the most popular experimental film. Kubrick said he wanted to bypass the verbal, so only a quarter of the movie even has dialogue, and yet it is a massive hit. You ask the average person, they would probably consider it one of the best movies of all time.
I did not know that you could do that with a movie. I didn't know you could make these worlds. And, I saw Star Wars like 3 years later, and that was similarly mind-blowing, but that was an adventure, and 2001 was, I think I took it in as a documentary. I was young enough that I didn't know the difference.
2001: A Space Odyssey is based on a book by Arthur C. Clarke, but that book hadn't really come out at the time of this film's release. They coincided with each other. It was almost more of a novelization phenomenon, and it's a very interesting adaptation in that way.
If you look at the amazing practical effects and sets built by Douglas Trumbull, nothing had ever really been done like this before. The ships floating through space, just all these slow moving pieces, it really just adds this sense of weightlessness and wonder.
The effects work holds up to date, not because the techniques are necessarily remarkably sophisticated, but because just aesthetically everything is so in line, so coherent. It just looks magnificent, every single aspect of the film.
2001 is a film of 3 segments, kind of the dawn of man, this battle with HAL 9000, and then the kind of trippy ending. But I think people really glom onto the HAL part. It is not the indiscriminate killing robot from regular sci-fi. This is a robot which seems to have become so human it's afraid to die. And I think that's just very compelling to the average viewer.
Ultimately, it has human features, and that's what makes it so creepy. I think what also effectively makes it creepy is the accent and the voice of Hal, which is a Canadian voice.
The voice of Hal is actor Douglas James Rain, one of the founders of the Stratford Film Festival, who was very well known for his Henry V. So when you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, know that Stanley Kubrick specifically wanted a Canadian for his politeness to play Hal.
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me. And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
We're still talking about this film because it understands the power of open-ended narratives and mystery. That's art.
We're not talking about the top 5 movies of all time. We're talking about the top 5 pieces of art in human history. And I will put 2001: A Space Odyssey in there.
Every time I see people who've made the effort to go to a theater and sit and watch, all 2+ hours of it on a big screen, you can hear a pin drop. Some movies become cliches and they become less. 2001 is actually somehow better than its reputation, which doesn't seem possible, but it is.